Welcome, I'm Brad Pomerantz, and we are coming to you from Washington, D.C. We are joined by Tom McClintock. He is a member of the United States Congress representing portions of Northern California, including significant parts of the Sierra Nevadas, such beautiful mountains that are not white right now.
We've got Lake Tahoe, we've got Yosemite Valley, Kings Canyon. It's the most beautiful part of the country.
So talk to us about what we're seeing in the Sierra Nevadas. I know the snowpack has gone up a bit. Maybe we're at about 30% of where we should be. Better than 12 from back in January, but how is it for you and your constituents?
I mean, obviously we're in a very serious drought. Droughts are inevitable. Droughts are Mother Nature's fault. Water shortages, on the other hand, are our fault. We've not built a major storage facility for the past 35 years.
And let's, if we can, really talk about storage. What exactly is storage?
It means building dams to retain water in wet years so that we have it in dry years. You know, the travesty is Northern California is one of the most water-rich areas of the continent, and yet we're looking at our reservoirs drained almost dry. A lot of it because of unnecessary releases due to environmental regulations. This past fall, for example, 800,000 acre-feet of water was deliberately drained out of our Northern California dams to meet all these various environmental requirements. By the way, ended up in being sent to Southern California after it was released. Which adds insult to injury. But the bottom line is, you know, the 800,000 acre-feet of water, that's a 1 acre column of water 150 miles deep. It's a tremendous amount of water. And it was needlessly released, even knowing that we were approaching a catastrophic drought year.
What's challenging, though, and you know this as well as anyone, is the courts are the courts, and if the courts order something, it's hard to go against what they say. But simultaneously, though, we do even have the governor of California, a Democrat, Governor Jerry Brown, looking to see some environmental regulations or some water regulations relaxed.
Well, on the contrary, we've seen nothing but rhetoric out of him. He's proposed $14 billion for these cross-delta tunnels that add absolutely zero additional water storage, zero additional hydroelectricity, $14 billion. For $6 billion, we could bring the Shasta Dam up to its design elevation of 800 feet. That would produce 9 million acre-feet of additional storage. That nearly doubles the water storage on the entire Sacramento River system.
Interestingly, some Democrats and Republicans agree with you, specifically on the Shasta. I mean, that's a very specific issue. But when we look at what's happening in California, I know you're a federal congressman, of course, but there is a bond that is being considered. And in that bond, there is money for storage, whether the Democratic proposal or the Republican proposal. But there's no doubt that on the Republican side, there is more money set aside for storage. Where do we go with that debate on the question of storage?
First of all, storage should not be paid for by general taxpayers. It ought to be paid for by revenue bonds redeemed by the users of the water and power that these dams generate. That's how we financed the entire state water project a generation ago. That's how we financed the Hoover Dam. That's the proper way of doing it. Furthermore, we put the cart before the horse these days. We go out and we authorize money without any idea of what it's going to be used for. Oh, well, storage. Well, what exactly does that mean? Well, nobody knows because they've never defined it. The result is it becomes a grab bag for all of these local water districts, and we end up with no real effect. I mean, if you look at the amount that was spent on the state water project a generation ago, the Burns-Porter Act, that comes to about $17 billion in today's inflation-adjusted measure. For $17 billion, we got 7 million acre-feet of water storage, 21 dams, 3,000 megawatts of hydroelectricity generation.
When we come back, let's continue this conversation. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, sir, there is no question, I think both sides would agree, that storage is a very important issue.
No, both sides don't agree on that. This is what's so frustrating. I mean, we've been fighting. Not only have we seen resistance for building any new dams in the last generation, the environmental left is actually actively agitated to tear down existing dams. You just mentioned that water bond.
Right.
That water bond includes $500 million to tear down 4 perfectly good hydroelectric dams on the Klamath River. The same people that are now backtracking and and saying, oh, well, we need to do something about storage. We're not quite sure what. Just a few years ago, we're agitating to tear down the Hetch Hetchy Dam. The Hetch Hetchy is what provides water for San Francisco.
But if you look at the bond proposals, again, I know you're in the federal Congress, there is money set aside.
But the projects are not even identified, and that's what happens. We've done this before. We've had a number of water bonds like this. They set aside money, they say, for storage. They never designate what that storage is, and so the bond becomes a grab bag for local water projects that don't add up to a hill of beans. I mean, again, we have spent far more over the past 10 years or so on water bonds than we spent to build the entire state water project a generation ago, which raises the question, where is our generation state water project? As I said, we haven't built a major dam since 1979.
So here's the question, though. There's no question, as you say, that we need storage. Will it happen? Who knows? But storage takes time to build. And so what do we do today?
We start building now. You know, the old story of Charles de Gaulle wanted some oak trees planted in front of his provisional headquarters, and one of his adjutants said, well, General de Gaulle, it takes decades for these oak trees to grow to maturity. And he said, well, then you better not waste any more time. Here's the bottom line. Everybody thinks that Colorado is the mother lode of all water in the western United States. Colorado is a junior sister to the mighty Sacramento. There's actually more water on the Sacramento. The difference is we store 70 million acre-feet on the Colorado. We store just 10 million acre-feet on the Sacramento. Most of the rest of that gets lost to the Pacific Ocean. We are not going to be clear of our water shortage problems until we take the steps in this generation that the last generation took to assure that we are storing that water in wet years so that it's available in dry years.
But I still want to push you, if I may, because there's no question that today we have a problem.
Yeah.
And storage can't be built quick enough to help us today.
Yeah.
So what do we do today?
We learn from our mistakes of the past generation, and we start building now to assure that this never happens again.
But still, do we look to conserve today? Do we look to recycle today? Do we look
Conservation is what we've been doing for the past generation. Instead of building new storage facilities, which increases the supply of water available, we've said, oh no, we don't need to do any of that. We'll simply conserve water. Well, conservation is a very important management tool when you have a shortage, but it is not a substitute for additional supply. So what we're now finding is, by making that mistake, we've already conserved an enormous amount of water, and then when we're hit by a real drought, we no longer have that flexibility. We no longer have that tool to manage the shortage. But ultimately, this comes right back down to the same thing, and that is we don't store enough water, and again, for a relatively small amount of money, we could literally double the storage capacity in the Sacramento system.
Ironically, though, and I'm sure you would know this, in Southern California, there's actually a good amount of storage. And Southern California is not suffering so much. I mean, you look at their storage facilities, and they're basically full. Northern California,
they're full because they released 800,000 acre-feet of water last fall out of the Northern California Northern California dams. So now Northern California faces a catastrophic water crisis because their water was ripped off using the excuse of environmental regulations. But when those environmental regulations were invoked, somehow that water ended up in Southern California reservoirs.
What can the federal government do?
The federal government can do a lot. It can, for example, begin by completing the Shasta Dam. That's 9 million acre-feet of additional water storage for $6 billion.
Has there been an appropriation?
It can complete the Auburn Dam. As a matter of fact, we just passed the Hastings bill, which sets up a revolving fund for precisely that purpose. And we have pending in the House my bill, which will set up a one-stop permitting process through the Bureau of Reclamation, based, by the way, on a process established for making upgrades in the Hetch Hetchy Dam, carried by none other than Nancy Pelosi. And as I said earlier, taxpayers don't have to be on the hook for this. These projects are typically produced through revenue bonds redeemed by the users of the water and power.
Okay, his name is Tom McClintock. He is a member of the United States Congress representing portions of Northern California. My name is Brad Palmerson, and we are coming to you from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.